Hello students, welcome to our online classes. Children, today we are going to learn part 2nd of History's chapters 4, the Mughal Empire. In the last chapter, we learned who were Mughals, where did they come from, their military campaigns, and also main Mughal emperors Babur, Humayun, Akbar. Then comes Jahangir, with the page is not open, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and the last one Aurangzeb. Now let's begin with the part 2nd video. Mughal traditions and successions. Okay, let's begin with this topic, Mughal traditions and successions. The Mughals did not believe in the rule of primogeniture. Now, what is the meaning of the word primogeniture? Primogeniture means where the eldest son inherited his father's estate. Means where the eldest, who is the bigger son, he will get all his father's estate. That means if Akbar's eldest son was Jahangir, then Jahangir will get all the estate of his father. So Mughals did not believe in this concept of primogeniture, where the eldest son will inherit his father's estate. Instead, they followed the Mughal and the Timurid custom of coparcenary. Now, what is the meaning of coparcenary? Coparcenary inheritance means what? The division of inheritance amongst all the sons. That means if an emperor is having 5 sons, then all his empire will be distributed in equally 5 parts, and he will give that equally, everything will be divided between his sons. Whereas in primogeniture, the eldest son will be given everything. Understood? So this is the difference between primogeniture and coparcenary. You have to keep this in mind. So Mughals didn't believe in the primogeniture, that only the eldest son will get everything and others will not get anything, but they believed in the coparcenary inheritance. That means their empire was distributed amongst equally distributed amongst all the brothers. Okay, so this led a conflict. Because of this, what happened? There was a conflict between brothers. Understood? They used to fight for superiority, and this we have learnt also in the table. So Mughals relation with, and one more point, Mughal marriages with the Rajputs. This is also very important. So many Mughal prince were married to the Rajput princesses. Okay, the mother of Jahangir, example is given. Mother of Jahangir was a Kachhawa princess, daughter of Rajput ruler Amber. Okay, now Jahangir's mother, that means Akbar's wife. Okay, who was she? She was a princess of Rajput princess of Kachhawa. Okay, and ruler of Amber, that is modern day Jaipur. And the mother of Shah Jahan was a Rathore princess. See, mother of Jahangir was Rajput princess, and mother of Shah Jahan was Rathore princess. That means a daughter of Rajput ruler. She was also Rajput, a ruler of Marwar, Jodhpur. By this we have understood that there was a marriage between Hindu Muslim. Mughals were Muslims and Rajputs were Hindus. So there was, at that time also, there was no discrimination, but many of them didn't accept it. But Mughals were very powerful, so many Rajput rulers had to accept it. Okay. Now next, what happened? Mughals' relations with other rulers. Now see, in this you will understand it more clearly. Take a look at table 1 once again. You will notice that the Mughals campaigned constantly against the rulers who refused to accept their authority. Now if we look here in the table, we will see that Mughals were constantly fighting with the rulers, those who denied their authority, means those who were not ready to accept the Mughals as their superiors. Okay, so what happened? They were constantly fighting with the people, those who denied their authority, and eventually by winning so many battles, Mughals became powerful. Mughals became powerful. And then afterwards, many of them, as Mughals were very powerful, many small kingdoms, many Rajput small kingdoms joined them voluntarily. Instead of fighting against the Mughal and losing everything, they joined them voluntarily. Means it's okay, if you are a big king, we will rule under your guidance. Okay. The Rajput are the good example of this. As I told you, they even married their daughters to the Mughal family. Many of them married their daughters into Mughal family. See, now this point came. Many of them married their daughters to the Mughal family, and by doing this, they received high positions. But many resisted as well. Not everyone was ready to marry their daughters, but many of them went against it also. Okay. Now next point, the Sisodia Rajputs of Mewar. The Sisodia Rajputs of Mewar refused to accept the Mughal authority for a long time. Means Sisodia Rajputs were not ready to accept the Mughals as their superior. Okay, they said that we will not work under the rule of Mughals. Okay, Sisodia Rajputs. Once they were defeated. After fighting for a longer time, as Mughals had become very powerful, they were defeated. But Mughals did not humiliate them. Okay, humiliate means they apman karne. Okay, they did not humiliate them, but honorably they treated them. See, they gave honor. Even though they were defeated in the battle, they honorably treated the Rajputs. So they gave their land, whatever land they have earned from the battlefield, they gave it back as a watan. Understood? So you have to keep this point. This is very important. Once defeated, however, they were honorably treated. They were not humiliated or insulted, but they were honorably treated. Okay, who had treated honorably? Mughals have treated Rajputs honorably. Okay. So, treated by Mughals, given their lands back as the assignments. That means their lands were owned by the Mughals, and again they were returned to them in a form of watan or a jagir. They were given watan or a jagir. The careful balance between defeating but not humiliating their opponents enabled the Mughals to extend their influence over many kings and chieftains. So now Mughals had become famous between the Rajput rulers that even though they are powerful, but they are down to earth. They are not humiliating. They are respecting their religion. They are not humiliating the rulers. Okay. So because of this, what happened, many other kings also joined Mughals. But it was difficult to keep this balance all the time. Yes, it is very difficult to rule such a huge kingdom. It is a natural thing, right? Look at table 1 again. Aurangzeb insulted Shivaji when he came to accept Mughal authority. If you remember, if you have read a story that Aurangzeb made Shivaji Maharaj to stand at the last row. When Shivaji Maharaj, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj had gone to Agra so that he can receive Mughal authority or he can accept Mughal authority, he insulted him. And what was the consequences of this insult? Everybody knows. Aurangzeb died in Maharashtra, right? Fighting against Maratha Empire. So this was the consequence. So it is very necessary that you should respect each other. Okay. Okay, now the next point, Mansabdars and Jagirdars. Now, who were the Mansabdars and Jagirdars? As the empire expanded to encompass different regions, the Mughals recreated diverse bodies of people. Now, the empire slowly expanded to the larger extent. So, to expand it more, Mughals, what they did, they from the small nucleus they recreated a diverse body of people. Means from the small peoples they started developing different posts. Now see, from the small nucleus of Turkish noble they expanded to include Iranians, Indian Muslims, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas, and other groups. Those who joined Mughal service were enrolled as Mansabdars. Now, what Mughals started? They started giving positions to everyone. So, for example, Turkish people, who are also known as Turanians, then Iranians, Indian Muslims, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas, and those who were working under Mughal Empire, they were enrolled as Mansabdars. They were enrolled as Mansabdars. So you understood who were Mansabdars? Okay. Now term Mansabdar refers to an individual. Individual means what? One person. Okay. The term Mansabdar refers to an individual who holds a mansab. Now what is the meaning of mansab? Meaning a position or a rank. mansab का meaning है position or rank. It was grading system. Now grade was based on according to rank, salary and military responsibilities. Rank and salary was determined by numerical value called zat. Zat means what? How we are getting cash payment. Same way they were given cash, numerical value called zat. The higher the zat, the more prestigious was the noble's position. Who was getting the highest salary, he was considered to be the most prestigious noble. That means most prestigious mansabdar with the larger salary. Okay, the mansabdar's military responsibilities required him to maintain a specific number of savar or cavalryman. Now this word savar or cavalryman means what? Cavalryman means soldiers, warriors, means Mansabdar having so many soldiers with him. For example, what he is supposed to do, he is supposed to bring those cavalryman or soldiers with him, get them registered, get his horses also registered there, and in turn Mughal Empire used to pay the salaries to them. Okay, now then what did the Mansabdar get against it? Mansabdar got the salaries in the form of jagirs or revenues. Okay, so Mansabdar received their salaries as revenue assignment called jagirs, which was somewhat like iktas. We have learned about iktas. Do you remember it? So, but unlike muktis, most Mansabdar did not actually reside in the administrator for jagirs. Now, many of them had jagir. For example, I am working in Karad, but I have given the jagir of Satara. So this kind was happening. This kind of thing were happening at that time, that a person was working somewhere else and was given jagir somewhere else. So but he was the Mansabdar was allowed to collect the revenue which is getting from his jagir, and it was his salary. Understood? Then only they had rights to the revenue of their assignment, which was collected for them as their servants. Okay, now we have understood. Okay, in Akbar's reign, these jagirs were carefully assessed. Akbar was a very, a great emperor. So he carefully looked after all these things. Okay, in Akbar's reign, the jagirs were carefully assessed, so as their revenues were roughly equal to the salary of Mansabdar. So whatever, for example, if I am supposed to get 50,000 zat, then he will give me such jagir from which the revenue also will come up approximately 50,000 only. Understood? Means he was very wise at that time also. Means, if I am getting 20,000 salary, and such jagir is been provided to me where I'll get 50,000 zats, then it's unfair. So at that time, what Akbar did, Akbar carefully looked into this, and he whatever he roughly gave the, sorry, just a moment. So Akbar's reign, jagir were carefully assessed and the revenue were roughly equal to the salary of the Mansabdar. By Aurangzeb's reign, what happened in Aurangzeb's reign? There was no longer the case, and the actual revenue collected was often less than the granted sum. See now what happened, exactly what happened. If I am given the jagir, a specific jagir, I can collect only 20,000, but my salary is 50,000. So this was a loss for Mughal Empire. Understood? So in Aurangzeb's reign, what happened? The Aurangzeb's reign, there was no longer the case. The actual revenue collected was often less than the granted some. There was also huge increase in the number of mansabdar. So many people were given as appointment of mansabdar. So many of them had a long wait for receive of their jagir. This and the other fact created the shortage of number of jagir. As a result, what happened? Many jagirdars tried to extract more revenue from the people. Aurangzeb was unable to control this development in the last year of his reign, and the peasantry therefore suffered tremendously. So the peasants who were giving revenue to the jagirdars, what happened now? The jagirdars started collecting more and more revenue from the peasants, and Aurangzeb was not able to control this situation, and so the peasantry suffered tremendously. Understood? Okay. So and now the next. So Zabt and Zamindars. The main source of income available in Mughal rulers was a tax on the produce of peasantry. The main source was tax which was imposed on the peasants. Okay. In most places, peasants paid taxes to the ruler elites, that is the headman or the local chieftain. To whom did the peasants pay taxes? Headman or the local person. Okay. The Mughals used one term zamindars to describe all these intermediaries where they had local headmen of villages or powerful chieftains. So these zamindars, they were described as intermediaries, means they were link between peasants and the Mughal Empire. Akbar's revenue minister, Todarmal, he was a very, very intelligent person. Okay, he was a revenue minister of Akbar, Todarmal, and he was Hindu. Carried out a careful survey on the crop yields, prices, and the areas cultivated for 10-year period, 1570 to 1580. On this basis of data, tax was fixed on each crop in cash. Each province was divided into revenue circles with its own schedule of revenue rates for individual crops. This revenue system is known as Zabt. Okay, it was prevalent in those areas where Mughal administration could survey the land. Okay, and keep a very careful account. Now Todarmal was a very, very intelligent person. He did survey of all the crops, and according to that he fixed the tax. Understood? So there will be no injustice to anyone. This was not possible in the provinces such as Gujarat and Bengal. Everywhere this was not possible. In some areas the zamindars exercised a great deal of power. The exploitation by Mughal administrators could drive them to rebellion. Sometimes zamindars and peasants of small caste allied in the rebelling against Mughal authority. These peasants' revolts challenged the stability of Mughal Empire from the end of the 17th century. Now what happened? Sometimes what happened? Administrators, those who were a link between peasants and the Mughal Empire, they exploited the peasants at so high level that they rebelled against the Mughal Empire. And sometimes what happened? The zamindars and the peasants together they came and they revolted against the Mughal Empire. So the empire had a threat from all sides, and this affected the Mughal Empire in the 17th century. Understood? Now this is a very important topic, Akbarnama or Aini Akbari. Akbarnama or Aini Akbari. Now what is Akbarnama? This we will learn now. Akbar ordered one of his close friends and courtiers, Abul Fazl. You have to keep this name in mind, Abul Fazl. So Akbar ordered one of his close friends and a courtier, Abul Fazl, to write the history of his reign. So he said that write the history of my reign so that coming generations will understand that what work I have done. Okay, Abul Fazl wrote 3 volumes of history. He wrote the 3 volumes. Okay, in first book and titled them Akbarnama, and those books were given the name Akbarnama. In first book, he wrote about Akbar's ancestors. The first volume dealt with the Akbar's ancestors, means his father, his grandfather, his great grandfather. About them he wrote in the first book. And the second book recorded the events of Akbar's reign, where he went, which battle he won, when he won, how he founded such a big, how he expanded such a big empire, everything was written. And in the third volume, Aini Akbari, Akbar's administration, how he administered such a huge empire, his household, army, revenue, geography of his empire, everything was mentioned. It also provides rich details about traditions and cultures of people living in India. The most interesting aspect about Aini Akbari is its rich statistical details about things as diverse as crops, yields, prices, wages, and revenues. That means at that time also the administration was very fine, okay, at Akbar's reign. Understood? So in this figure 7 you can see that Akbar is receiving the Akbarnama from Abul Fazl. So he has written 3 books on Akbar, and that books were named as Akbarnama. Okay, understood? Okay, now let's look a closer look Akbar's policies. A closer look Akbar's policies. Now, what helped Akbar to administer such a huge kingdom efficiently? The broad features of the administration were laid down by Akbar and were elaborately discussed by Abul Fazl in this book. How Akbar administered his entire empire was written elaborately, means in detail, by whom? Abul Fazl, in the book Akbarnama. Okay, and in the last volume Aini Akbari, which we learned here. Okay, Abul Fazl explained that the empire was divided into provinces. Abul Fazl said that the empire was divided into provinces, and each province was called as subas, and subas was governed by subedar. Subedar means the chief of Suba, he was known as Subedar, who carried out both political and military functions. He was given the responsibility of carrying out the political and military function. Each province also had a financial officer or divan. Each province or each subas had a financial officer or divan for the maintenance of peace and order in this province. The Subedar was supported by the other officers such as military paymaster, who was also known as Bakshi, military paymaster known as Bakshi, the minister in charge of religious and charitable patronage, he was known as Sadr, and the military commanders, he was known as Faujdar, and the town police commander, he was known as Kotwal. These all people helped the Subedars to administer their subas. Okay. Now let's learn about Nur Jahan's influence in Jahangir's court. How was Nur Jahan's influence in Jahangir's court? Mehrunisa married to Emperor Jahangir. Nur Jahan's real name was Mehrunisa in 1611 and received the title Nur Jahan. She remained extremely loyal and supportive to the monarch. That means she was very loyal and supportive towards her husband. As a mark of honor, Jahangir struck silver coins bearing his own titles on one side and other the inscription struck in the name of Queen Begum Nur Jahan. The adjoining document is an order Farman of Nur Jahan. The square seal states that command of her most sublime and elevated majesty Nur Jahan Padshah Begum. The round seal states by the son of Jahangir she becomes a brilliant and moon, and Nur Shahjah Begum becomes a lady of the age. That means she wishes that she may give birth to the child of Jahangir. Okay, that means the lady of the age. Understood? Now what happened? Akbar's nobles commanded large armies and had access to large amount of revenue. While they were loyal to the empire, functioned efficiently, but at the end of the 17th century, what happened? Many nobles had built the independent network. Their loyalty of the empire was weakened for their own self-interest. While Akbar was at Fatehpur Sikri during 1570s, he started discussion on religion. Akbar believed in that all religions are one, means we cannot discriminate the people on the basis of the religions. So what he did, see, he started discussion with the ulamas. Ulama means how the Brahmins are Hindus religious priest, same way ulamas are Muslims religious priest. Okay, so ulama, Brahmins, Jewists, priests or who were Roman Catholics or Zoroastrians. So he started discussing about the religion with all these people in the Ibadat Khana. So he was interested in the religion and social customs of different people. Akbar's interaction with the people of different faith made him realize that religious scholars are emphasized ritual and dogma were often bygones. Now, what is the meaning of dogma? Dogma means a statement or an interpretation declared as authority with the expectation that it will be followed without question. For example, if a priest says anything, a person should follow it without any question. If he believes it or doesn't believe it, if he knows it, if he thinks it is right, wrong, nobody should question him. Whatever the priest says, he should follow it. And bigot means what? An individual who is intolerant of another person's religious belief or culture. For example, that we are not respecting others' religion. A Hindu is not respecting Muslims' religion. Muslims are not respecting Christians' religion. So this is what that we are not respecting each other's religion. At that time, he found, when he learnt about all the religions, he found that there is a dogma and bigot things in the religions. Okay. Their teachings created diverse divisions and disharmony amongst the subjects. So what happened? Because of this, the diverse effect was happening on the people. So there was disharmony among the people. This eventually led Akbar to the idea of Sulekul. This is very important. Sulekul or universal peace. Akbar was very, very tolerant. He accepted all the religions with open heart. Okay, even though he was a Mughal, he was open-heartedly accepting everyone's religion, and he was respecting the religion idea. Okay, this idea of tolerance did not discriminate between the people of different religions in the realm. Instead, it focused on the system of ethics, honesty, justice, peace, and this was universally applicable. So how great the Emperor Akbar was. See, he was what his ethics were, system of ethics were honesty, justice, peace, and that which were universally applicable. Abul Fazl helped Akbar in framing a vision of governance around this idea of Sulekul. This principle of governance was followed by Jahangir and Shah Jahan also. So after Akbar, even Jahangir and Shah Jahan believed in the same thing, that all religions are equal. Jahangir's Akbar's son described his father's policy, Sulekul, in the following words: as in the wide expanse of the divine compassion, there is a room for all classes and the followers of all creeds. So, in this imperial dominance, which on all the sides were limited only by the sea, there was room for the professors of opposite religions and for the beliefs good and bad, and the road of intolerance was closed. Sunnis and Shias met in one mosque, and Christians and Jews in one church to pray. He constantly followed the principle of universal peace. Sulaykul means what? Sulaykul means universal peace. That means there is only one religion, that is humanity. Okay, understood? Now, next. So now this is the last point of the chapter, the Mughal Empire in the 17th century and after. What happened? How did the Mughal Empire declined in 17th century and after that we'll see. The administrative and the military efficiency of the Mughal Empire led to great economic and commercial prosperity. Now Akbar was a very good administrator and his military efficiency was also very good, and this led to an economic and commercial prosperity of the Mughal Empire. International travelers describe it as a fabled land of wealth, but these same visitors were also appealed at the state of poverty that existed side by side with the greatest opulence. Now, with the greatest opulence means what? They had seen there was a diverse condition, means some were very very rich and some were very very poor. The inequalities were glaring. The inequalities were glaring means it was clear that a lot of inequalities there. Documents from the 20th year of Shah Jahan's reign inform us that the highest ranking Mansabdars were only 445 number out of the total 8,000. 8,000 Mansabdars were there, and among them only 445 Mansabdar were highest in the number. This small number was mere 5.6% of the total number of Mansabdar, received 61.5% of total estimated revenue of empire as salaries for themselves and the troopers. See, only 5.6% of people in the empire received 61.5% of total revenue. So some were very, very, very rich, and others were very, very, very poor. So there was no balance between in the economy. Understood? The Mughal emperors and their Mansabdar spent a great deal of their income on salaries and goods. The Mughal emperors, what they did, and the Mansabdar paid a lot of money on the salaries and goods. This expenditure benefited the artisans and peasantry who supplied them with the goods and produce. But the scale of revenue collection left very little for the investment in the hands of primary producers, the peasants and the artisans. The poorest among them lived from hand to mouth, and they could hardly consider investing in additional resources, tools, and supplies to increase productivity. The wealthier peasantry and the artisanal group, the merchants and the bankers profited in the economic world. Now what happened? So some people were having lot of money, so they started buying goods. That means they started buying goods and produce from the peasantry or from the artisans. So what happened, the farmers at the last were not getting a huge amount of money. Understood? So they became very, very, very poor. They became poorer and poorer. They became bankrupt, and also they started borrowing money. And it was very diverse condition that rich people were becoming more richer and the poor people were becoming more poorer. And in this case, no empire cannot survive for the longer period. Understood? The enormous wealth and the resources commanded by the Mughal elite made them an extremely powerful group of people. In the late 17th century, as the authority of Mughal emperor slowly declined, his servants emerged as powerful centers of power in the regions. Now many people had become rich, so many of them were having power, and on this basis they started revolting against the Mughal empire. They constituted new dynasties and held a command of provinces like Hyderabad and Awadh. Now most of the income source of Mughal empire was peasant. See, farming from peasantry was giving more money to the empire, but now peasants have only become very, very poor. So Mughal empire slowly started declining because there was no balance between the revenue system. There was no balance between the economical system. And then afterwards the poor rich people started commanding the provinces like Hyderabad, Awadh and all. Okay, although they continued to recognize the Mughal emperor in Delhi as their master, by the 18th century the provinces of empire had consolidated their independent political identities, and we will read about them in the next chapter number 10. Okay, then the kings and queens, this you can learn. This is elsewhere. Okay, you can read it, you will understand it. Video is becoming too much large, and I will also give the PDF of this question. By this we come with the end of the lesson. I hope you have really enjoyed watching the video. And children, if you are interested in watching the previous videos, if you want to study for the exam, then you can go on the channel. You will get all our previous videos. Thank you for watching. If any doubt, you can ask me personally. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.